It is Money Talks. It is John Gibbons. I am with Dave Powell. I'm in association with Saley, but more from them later. I want to get straight into it with Dave because it's been a while since I've seen you. A lot's happened in that meantime. Liverpool are the richest club in England. We learned from the good people at Deloitte, and so I'm sure there's plenty of people pleased with that. But also in the January transfer window, Liverpool have signed a player. Well, sort of as fans. We're not going to get to watch him anytime soon, but Jérémy Jacquet has signed up for Liverpool, not Chelsea, as being talked. So Liverpool will be pleased with it. The deal's interesting because as supporters, we look at it and think, oh, well, we could do with the centre half now, and he's not coming. Obviously, there's the players' wishes, there's the selling club's wishes, but from Liverpool's point of view, is there any benefit to them? Bearing in mind they spent a lot in the summer, you know, pushing that back as well, but having it over the line and having it sorted.
I think so. I mean, at the moment, we're in a situation where the Champions League isn't nailed down like it has been in, you know, more recent years. And we've seen previously the impact of what a year without Europa League football can do. Not only from a financial standpoint, because your revenues diminished quite significantly. So it was a £57 million loss accounted for the year that Liverpool in the Europa League. It's also from a selling point. Now, win at the weekend, give everyone a lift, and you know everyone's looking towards, you know, the Champions League is still very much the goal. I think it's easier to sell that to players when you are chasing something down. Maybe they would have painted themselves into a bit of a corner had they left it to, you know, had the decision been made later. I know Chelsea were in for Jacquet as well, but whether they would have pulled the trigger on that or whether he would have assessed his options in the summer, I don't know. But you have to have a selling point, and obviously Liverpool being Liverpool is a selling point, but these young players now want Champions League football because that's the greatest exposure. Best way to get better. They don't want to spend time in the Europa League. So I think getting it done now, they've probably paid, well, they have paid over what is perceived as being his market value, but really what is that? You know, so CIES, which is kind of a Swiss analytics firm, which kind of assesses how you value players from how many first-team appearances they made, the strength of the league, international caps, all that. Pegged him at like 25 million. Now Liverpool have gone in more than double that. But transfer market is basically what one club is willing to pay another club, and that's it. Yeah. And Liverpool obviously place significant faith in him moving forward, that they would commit to that spend. It's not going to be spend which knocks anything out of sync in terms of where they are at with kind of squad cost ratio regulations or anything like that. It's just a case of getting a good deal done early. And when you factor in that Giovanni Leone is going to be coming back next season, so they already signed one of European football's best central defenders this season, and he would have featured heavily already. We know that but he's suffered an injury in his debut. And we talk about succession planning. I look at it really and I wonder whether, I was surprised they didn't go for a more senior centre-back because the options in the building aren't kind of plentiful at the moment, and they are fighting on several fronts. And they haven't really got that kind of stopgap. We still don't know what's happening with Ibu Konate's future. You know, fantastic performance against Newcastle, but it's not been the norm this season. Virgil van Dijk's turning 35 this summer. There just seems to be that big gap between, so it could be the case where Konate leaves and you're kind of left with this big gap between some very young centre-halves. You've got Joe Gomez still in the building, but then Virgil van Dijk. So I do think they may go back to the market again for someone like that. But obviously the Gahey deal still kind of sticks in the craw a little bit.
Yeah, well, absolutely. But he's gone to Manchester City now. And you mentioned that Konate, and it is an interesting one to me, the fact that he is so close to running down his contract. His contract expires in the summer. As of January 1st, he can sign a pre-contract with European clubs, not in England. He hasn't done that yet. What you hear is that there's still a willingness on both sides to do a deal. There's just a little bit of a gap on in terms of salary expectation on one side and what another club is willing to pay. Whether they can meet in the middle somewhere and he signs on, time will tell. But it is interesting to me that there seems to be a bit of a change at the moment, certainly from a Liverpool point of view, which is where my focus is. But maybe it's a bit wider than that on these contracts, and how is it the clubs who are willing now to let them go right to the wire? Is it would the clubs not like to do that, but it's just that the players that are recognising that their power, that the longer it goes, and you see that with Gehi, you mentioned there, he's got himself a magnificent deal, and Manchester City, fair play to him and his agent, because they've managed to do that. But obviously he would have gone in the summer, how Crystal Palace allowed him to. But from a fan point of view, again, there's a lot of fans saying, well, how are we letting these contracts run out? There's Curtis Jones, who was out of contract next summer. There was a bit of talk about him maybe leaving in January, trying to get sort of a fee for him. It does look like that the clubs, Liverpool in particular, are either allowing these contracts to go on a little bit longer, or or it's just sort of happening to them. But either way, it's the kind of thing that makes fans nervous. What do you make of it?
I think the power now lies with the players, and that's just it is in the players' best interest to have options available at the end of the season where they don't have to worry about their club negotiating a fee to allow them to leave. Also gives them greater power to negotiate a bigger sell-on clause, not sell-on clause, sorry, a signing-on fee, because they don't, the club they're signing for no longer has to account for paying a transfer fee to another club. It's not optimal at all for any club to let their players enter the final year of their contract and not have anything sorted, because the idea was a couple of years left, you'd engage players, even if you didn't really think they're going to feature beyond the end of that deal. You engage them in a new deal, because the power then lies with you, and you sell a player, you can determine a price, you can get back largely often what you've paid, or not, if not more, given the way the market's risen. But we've seen it last summer with Trent Alexander-Arnold, perhaps slightly different narrative around that. But with Konate, it seemed to be initially Liverpool reluctant to offer him a new deal, because maybe they didn't see him as a long-term fit, and they would have moved him on before that. Then there was the interest from Real Madrid, which came to nothing. So I think they may have been expecting last summer to have fielded some calls, which never really came to fruition. And then you're left with a situation where he's not been playing well. The optics look bad to give a new contract to a player who's not been performing well, who, yes, excellent the weekend, but the sentiment around him has not been great for a number of months now. So the optics aren't great from that point of view. So I do wonder, but in Liverpool's ideal scenario, they would have got this tied down and would have maybe looked to have sold him this summer. But now they're left to kind of either engage with a player that they could have engaged with on a new contract previously, because they've kicked the can down the road quite a bit with it, and obviously there's some element of the player's part who wanting to test the waters with the future, and I think he was waiting for Real Madrid to come in and make a move as well. And I think the whole situation has just created this this moment where nobody really knows what anyone wants. The Liverpool see Konate as a key man for the next season, or would they have rather gone to market? I think they would have rather gone to market and sold him for a fee, but now they're possibly left with having to the cheapest way forward, which gives you some more security, I suppose, is engaging Konate in a longer term deal. But the power lies with the players, because for him, he will have plentiful options this summer, and his wages that he'll be able to command, given the fact that clubs don't have to pay a transfer fee, will be far higher. So, yeah, I think maybe there's movement on both parts, because I think, does he go to, he probably sees Liverpool as, where else is he going to go, which is bigger. Now, I think what's happened over the past course of a year, I suppose, of his form has probably put off some of the biggest suitors. Depends what he wants from it, really. But the power, when you get into the last year of the contract, lies with the player.
Is this a situation then that Liverpool have got themselves in through the change in sporting directors? So obviously Richard Hughes, who's done something with Standard Chartered. Well, as we're recording today, is yesterday. We've not had a chance to see it yet. It's been out an hour, but it's going to be an interesting watch, him on a slot and Billy Hogan. But Richard Hughes has been in position just over a year. I'm sure when he arrived in last summer, Ibu Konate's contract wasn't exactly at the top of his list of things to sort. He had 3 other players who had 12 months left on there, so you can kind of understand a little bit how it slept. Is this something, you know? And then before that, it was a George Schmeichel who seemed quite fun, but was seemingly there to do deals from Ibiza and not necessarily look at the long-term structure. And then before then, there's there's the Michael Edwards area. Do you think Liverpool will see this as a result of that? I feel turmoil is exaggerating it a little bit, but this is why you want long-term structures in your place. This is why you want the sporting director to be there 5 years, 10 years, 15 even, not sort of 2 or 3, and things can change around all the time.
Yeah, and I also think that Liverpool, the in tray for Richard Hughes was pretty large. He was trying to retain the irreplaceable, I suppose, in terms of Mo Salah. Virgil van Dijk. Is Ibou Konate replaceable? Yes.
Well, the first thing you had to do was replace Ian Klopp.
He
felt pretty irreplaceable.
Pretty big on that. Yes. But every player thinks they're the most important piece of the puzzle, and they have their own worth, and what they're doing is fighting for their own worth consistently. So the fact that it's dragged on down the road, Ibou Konate is probably not thinking, well, yeah, of course they had the manager situation to sort out, and then obviously there's Van Dijk and Salah, so, and I'm not at that level. That's not how it works. So I think there's probably an annoyance on his side that Liverpool didn't act decisively and swiftly to get something done. But I don't think it's the kind of the turmoil behind the scenes. I think there was just indecision over whether or not he was a long-term fix, and also the noise around him. Like I said before, I think they thought there was going to be movement before that, where they wouldn't really have to engage in a new deal. But that's not transpired because form has not been great, and there was some injury concerns, etc. But in hindsight, you need both parties to agree to a deal. Though it's not just a case of Liverpool saying sign this so we can charge a fee in next summer to protect ourselves. The players don't care whether they're really, if they're doing the club a solid by signing a deal so they can sell them for a higher fee after that, because all it does is limit their own options. So I just think it's one of those situations where you've got two kind of conflicting narratives, I suppose, that have just moved this situation into a final year scenario, which is of benefit to one side more than the other. Yeah.
So is the solution to do what Chelsea seem to do and get people on as long a deal as possible when you can get them on early? I mean, maybe that's why Liverpool beat Chelsea. One of the reasons for Jérémy Jacquet, maybe they wanted to get him on a 12-year deal or something like that.
Yeah,
like France here, but they've moved to tie players down to these longer term contracts, presumably because to try and avoid this situation.
Yes, I mean, obviously for kind of accounting purposes, you can only do deals at 5 years for amortization, but you can offer players longer term deals if you want, just to keep them there. The difficulty is with that, and you would have thought Chelsea would learn from the Winston Bogarde years of having someone literally sit in the stands for 4 years.
It's been a while since I've heard that.
Yeah. But there is players hold their value when they're playing and they're doing well. So when things happen which kind of impact that. So if you look at Mykhailo Mudryk, kind of scenarios which Chelsea couldn't really have accounted for. Axel Disasi was signed on a long-term deal, except Badiashile, and they've just, when they don't work out and they're on long-term deals, they haven't got to go anywhere. The club can try and move them and make it as difficult as possible, but these guys are on big money, and they don't have to go anywhere. So, and if they're not in the plans, it means the value of those players is diminishing anyway. It's only when a player's value only really holds when they're playing. So, look, if you've got, if you're Liverpool and you looked at Florian Wirtz as being the man for the next 10 years, that's great. But the same reason why Manchester City gave Haaland that decade-long deal, because they think they can't replace him. But in reality, if there's a loss of form, or something just doesn't work out as expected, or they get a ACL injury and it's career ending and all this, or they start to pick up injuries and their impact becomes less and less. You're left carrying the can for someone on a very long contract who doesn't have to go anywhere, who wouldn't get the security and length of a deal anywhere, and they could just be farmed out on loan relentlessly. I don't think it's going to catch on. I mean, North American sports is very much long-term deals.
Well, the 10-year deals.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think what's the guy, the baseball player, Shohei Ohtani? I think his deal's actually for like 20 odd years, which the deal goes beyond.
Yeah,
when he's retiring, he will still be
still.
So, but that's that's a different kind of financial model there. But I think it allows for greater financial planning, really, and the values are only going to be so high. You know, you're not going to get much more. Clubs aren't going to want to pay more money because someone's got 5 years left in the deal when they've already run 5 years of their deal. I think we're probably in the sweet spot of about 5 or 6 years. I think clubs, when they have a marquee player who is the right age profile, maybe it's slightly different. But that's only to ward off major clubs from picking off their talents. So the Cole Palmer thing is probably Chelsea are quite happy about that. Because would he have got picked off for a smaller fee already? You know, by the time he's a few years into his deal, potentially. But they've kind of allowed themselves some negotiation room. But that only really works for marquee players. If it's just for squad players, it's a pretty dangerous tactic.
Yeah, we'll just see how it develops with Konate and Curtis Jones and a few others. And I think for younger players as well, it's a tough one. Know what the best thing is for them. Really, they can't sign pro forms until they're 17. But how long you sort of agree for that, and you see sometimes a young player will sign up for the club or move club, and then it doesn't quite work out for them. And I think at that age, it is a real sweet spot because they're not necessarily looking at wanting to tie themselves too long down, because things can change so quickly when you're 17, 18. Your pathways can close, managers can change, different managers come in with different ideas of how to use young players. And I always feel a little bit not sorry for those lads, because I mean every kid dreams of signing a pro forms for the Premier League club at 17, but it is a tough decision for those players, isn't it? Because there's so many variables, there's so much down to looking out of their hands.
I think in reality, you're only looking at a handful of clubs in world football where players are happy to sign long-term contracts which tie them to them, because the competitive outlook can change quite quickly. There is an expectation that Liverpool will be good or be challenging for major honours every single season without fail, ad infinitum. So the same for Manchester United. Yes, they still carry the clout from they had. But yeah, and you look abroad, you've got Real Madrid, Barcelona. People will still tie themselves and wed themselves to those clubs for long terms, because where else is better in terms of competitive success? But for the clubs in the middle of that bracket, it's far more challenging. Is Bournemouth going to get people tying themselves to 6 or 7 year deals? They're not, because there's the risk of a bad season, or a manager goes and then a few players go and then it's the Championship, and then it becomes a different conversation. But I think for young clubs, players now, they're far more. I mean, they're advised from the age of 9, whatever it is. There's always some element of kind of a trajectory they have in mind. So I think players, even younger players now, realise that it is they who have the power if they have the talent. So, and I don't see a way that's going to change anytime soon. So I think, I don't know. I think we might see a kind of a reversal back to some shorter term contracts, which allow players the ability to be a bit more flexible, but while also protecting the clubs that are out, so they get a hefty fee.
Yeah, and is that why it is so important for these clubs who maybe aren't at the very top to be good sellers and to be seen as good sellers as well, and doing the right things by players? You look at Rennes in this situation. They've got a really good fee for the player that they've developed, that they've sort of helped kick on, but also they want to be almost giving the message to the next person: listen, come to us, and then you get your big move to Liverpool, because that's part of their financial structure. It's part of how you attract players. And it's you look at Bournemouth, in the Premier League. I think they are a team who get themselves good deals, but also I think are keen to show that they don't stand in players' way. And I think it's doing what's best for you, but also being seen as someone who will facilitate these moves for a player. That I think is is a fine balance, but I think it's a balance that these clubs want to try and find, because I think reputation is important, and it's really interesting to be looking at Crystal Palace at the moment, who've gone from a club that looked really well run to a little bit of a mess. There's the Gay thing over the summer that apparently didn't go down too well, when he's there sitting there in Liverpool, and suddenly the plug's pulled from that. Of course, he gets upended his move in January, but then you've got Mateta going, well, I want out. You know, he spent all of January basically, I mean, not quite on strike, but really desperate to go. His move falls through. That affects the Dwight McNeil thing. And then you've got the really sad situation of his partner coming out and saying, you know, how much that's affected him. And all of that isn't sort of great for them if you know, from a point of view of, listen, there's people involved here, but also for potential players looking at that or thinking, well, hang on, if I've got a choice between Bournemouth and Crystal Palace, well, they're going to do the right thing for me, whereas another club, you know, there maybe not. And then if the manager goes after all that, then it's how you're perceived amongst these developing players is a big thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the Rennes sporting director or the manager said around, you know, this was the best deal we could possibly hope for, because there's the acceptance that these players will go. Now, I don't know whether Oliver Glasner obviously comes in with a big, you know, good reputation, and he's done very well at Palace, unquestionably. But I think he had the frustration of, why are we selling our best players? That's the way it goes. You know, this is, you know, there is a food chain in effect in football. It was ever thus, really. You know, it's not a new thing. But Palace, obviously, they faced a situation where they did so well that there was kind of several of their key performers have all kind of had to be sold. So there's Michael Olise, Eberici Eze, Guéhi, you know, Adam Wharton was for a period everyone was looking at, you know. So there is, you know, the clubs just have to, you know, but there is this kind of stance from Glasner of no more. You know, we keep our best players, otherwise we can't compete. And the issue is, it's kind of created this this rather kind of unsavoury atmosphere at Palace, where it seems a little toxic at the moment, because you've got the manager thinks the club should be keeping their best players to challenge and to achieve competitive success, which ultimately is what the game's all about. While you've got the ownership who are thinking, well, what we are is, you know, if we do well, we sell the best players and we try and replace them. So, but maybe they haven't done a good enough job at actually replacing these players. So you look at the players they brought in this window, quite bizarre to me. I don't see the resale value in those purchases. Brennan Johnson's already, how many games through?
Yeah.
How many clubs through in his Premier League career? Didn't work at Tottenham. So, what ways you look at, yes, Brighton accept they're going to have fallow years sometimes, because sometimes the talent pool isn't rich enough that you can sustain that every single year.
It just takes a while for these
next players to come through. Yeah, it takes a couple of years, but as long as you can tread that water between kind of 14th and 9th or whatever for a bit, that's fine. But Palace looks a bit more precarious now, and they've changed the whole narrative of what they are as a club, and that's problematic. Whereas the likes of Bournemouth still be fine, Brighton, etc., moving forward, because they have that strategy in place. But I just wonder, but in reality, clubs like, you know, it is those kind of clubs that provide the conveyor belt of talent through to the likes of Liverpool. So, you know, you've had Alexis McAllister in recent years, you know, Guéhi would have come, Milas Kerkez from Bournemouth, you know, so that's the natural progression, and that's the ecosystem we live in. Whether we like it or not, whether it's right or not, that is what it is, and there is no real way of ownership to kind of break that up and challenge it. But what owners see as kind of how to run a club is very different to what managers who are there to achieve competitive success do, and that's kind of the kind of bumping heads we see at Palace at the moment.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating, and I think it's going to run and run, especially if the manager ends up leaving as well, because probably he believes that he can go on and do other things, just not necessarily the players will do it. But hey, but more hypocrites.
He'll be very disappointed that Michael Carrick's doing well at Manchester United.
Listen, we're going to talk a little bit about Deloitte just to finish off, but I do want to give a huge shout out to Saley for partnering with us again for the month of February. If you're an international businessman like Dave Powell, you need to keep an eye on roaming charges and things like that. He's off to America in March. I'm going to Benidorm. It's all very similar. You don't want to come back and get left with a nasty bill, and that's where Saley come into it. It is so easy to use. Even I've been able to do it. You download the Saley app on your phone, and there should be things flashing up right now at the moment that are able to scan a QR code if you're enjoying this as a video, or just download the app straight to your phone if you are enjoying this as audio. And then when prompted, use the code TAW and you will get 15% off. But you just let Saley know, let the app know where you're going, how long you're going for, how much data it is you want. It is all out there forward. The pricing is very, very competitive, and especially with that 15% discount, courtesy of using the code TAW, it is even better. And then as soon as you land, it kicks in. You flip over to travel mode and you're using your Saley minutes instead of your contract ones, and it will save you a lot of money, and also make sure that you're not getting caught out on using internet abroad as well. So thanks a lot to Saley. Do check them out, and I know so many of you have enjoyed it, which is why they have come back to us. So I appreciate all you guys for using Saley and supporting us in the meantime, because that is why they're back in amongst us. Deloitte. Then Liverpool, top of the league. Liverpool, top of the league. It's something to be celebrated. To be doing a popping champagne in Chapel Street, or they probably do these things. And you pointed out, you almost live it in the past. It's retrospective. Liverpool did well in a year that Deloitte choose. At some points, they probably moved on from all that now. But still nice to see us at the top of the English clubs. It should be said, still a little way off the likes of Real Madrid.
Mr. Parade.
Next
holding
time.
a spreadsheet up. Yeah. No, I mean, always, we always talk about how baffling it is that chatting about football finance is actually a thing. I'm glad it is, because it keeps my lights on. But it is instructive as to where a club is going, the trajectory of it, the health of it, what they can do in the transfer market. And I also think that Liverpool doing it, I've done it very organically, so it's over a period of time. So the first thing that kind of Fenway Sports Group said when they came in was, we're going to run a sustainable club, to achieve sustained success, etc. The sustained success would have been more were it not for Manchester City, but we still have all that rumbling on the background. Manchester City have won, countless trophies, all these commercial deals, but still fall behind Liverpool, even in terms of global reach, audience, and commercial value, etc. Because Liverpool, and they've been really, really good at not only returning the club to competitive success, but also improving all the facets of the club. So matchday revenue's up because the stadium grew, commercial revenue's up because the club's done well on the pitch, but also they've become a really compelling story again. People are interested and done really well at growing the brand, it's hard to say that, brand globally. So if you look at a lot of the commercial partners, even just this year that have come on board, a lot of North American ones, Tommy Hilfiger and stuff like that. So that's a kind of the Premier League first to have someone like that to come on board. A lot of US firms have kind of joined them on that because they see the value in Liverpool as a brand, because they're kind of, not only do they give exposure and they're very good storytellers, but they're also a safer pair of hands. It's more difficult to predict the future for someone like Manchester City or even Chelsea, because they've had ownership changes have changed. They've been quite scattergun with their approaches. They themselves have had issues with kind of the past with Abramovich hanging over and all this type of stuff. As a brand, Liverpool still remain kind of probably the most alluring brand in the Premier League. Manchester United have had decline over the past decade, which has impacted the value of their sponsorship deals. So all this, Liverpool have just kind of quietly surpassed everyone and taken their seat back at the top of the table. All it requires them to do now is to do the same competitively on the pitch. This season can be more of a challenge, but next season. So it all just speaks to the strength of the team. So 700 million plus in revenues. I think the prediction probably by 2030, 2032, maybe probably pushing £1 billion worth. And I don't know. This always points eventually to at what point do Fenway Sports Group say, you know what, it's probably us done now, because there will be a tipping point for the Premier League. These things don't go up forever, ever. You know, it's not what goes up must come down. And I think all eyes will be on what happens with the TV deals moving forward as to whether that, because the strength of the Premier League is predicated on the strength of its broadcast deals. As everyone it kind of starts to look at the cost of living, which doesn't get any cheaper. Sky subscriptions are expensive. TNT subscriptions aren't cheap. And, you know, people look for alternative means. So it'll be interesting to see what the future holds. But for now, Liverpool are the best positioned to kind of weather any financial storms, economic headwinds, all that type of technical jargon, and probably set themselves up to be in and amongst the big spenders for the next, you know, decade or more.
It was interesting. I mentioned earlier the Standard Chartered video that's just come out with Billy Hogan, with Arne Slot and Richard Hughes. We haven't had a chance to watch it yet. It literally came out, I think, at time I told you about it when you walked in. You've been travelling over, so it was out minutes before we sort of came in. But I did see some quotes from it, and Billy Hogan talks about recruitment, and he's asked about recruitment, and I think he's asked about player recruitment, but he said, well, recruitment for me is not just footballers, but coaches and the commercial team. And it was interesting, he not necessarily singled out commercial team, was he's wider, but for him, Billy Hogan, who's at the top of the tree in terms of the day-to-day operations at Liverpool, there has been the desire to get the best people for every position, and to get so we're obsessed with footballers. Who's the best striker we can get? Who's the best goalie can get? That's Arne Slot's thing. Richard Hughes has to think about a little bit more. Okay, who's the best coaches that we can get? Who's the best recruitment? Scouts and kind of people like that. But for someone like Billy Hogan, he's thinking, well, I want the way Liverpool get to the top of that and stay there, and therefore have it more likely that there's success on the football pitches, that we need the very best people working in all departments, because that is how you compete with Manchester City, who've generally speaking got deeper pockets.
Yeah, and I think they've really done that. So, I mean, you and I have spent time with the same people who work in the commercial departments. Are very savvy, very astute, and they are kind of best in class. So Ben Latty moved over to become kind of commercial director. Kate Pratt-Theobald in the US kind of took on his previous role, and the remit isn't just to bring in lots of money from commercial revenue. Of course, that's that has to be achieved, but another layer of the task, which makes it a challenge, is they have to be brands which kind of align with Liverpool, that aren't, don't carry great risk, that can have additional value. So some of these deals, you see kind of headline figures attached to them, but these deals are worth far more. So the Adidas deal, for example, that'll be worth far more over time than probably has been shown, just for add-ons that come with competitive success, etc. And I think they've built up like a really, really strong portfolio of brands which are there for the long term as well. And what that means is they have a lot of retention as well. So sponsorship retention is usually a sign of things are going really well. So Standard Chartered will be thrilled that as part of their activation or engagement for their sponsorship, they know they'll get a round table with the manager, the sporting director and the CEO discussing topics which fans want to hear, exclusively with their name attached to it, and they'll get millions of views, and all with kind of Standard Chartered as behind that. That's valuable. That's the kind of advertising which doesn't really, it's not white noise to people watching an advert.
Yeah.
It is, something where they're engaged with the actual, it's like it becomes an event rather than just simply putting Standard Chartered on the front of a shirt. So, they're to be applauded, and it sounds, but ultimately, you're saying, well, it's commercial revenue, who cares? But that's the way, unless you're growing commercial revenue is something which every club has to do, because the other stuff can fall away very quickly. You have to, prize money can diminish season by season if you don't qualify for the Champions League or something. Your match day revenue can be impacted by not having additional games, by qualifying for the Champions League or being in domestic competition. And broadcast rights and media revenue could fall dependent on whatever deal the Premier League negotiate with Sky. So you have to have your commercial revenue really is clubs have put more emphasis on that because they know full well that other stuff might fall away, and Liverpool's have been on a steep incline.
Yeah, well, it's all looking good at the moment, so hopefully it starts looking a little bit better on the pitch as well.
Just win all the games at the end of the season, everyone's happy.
I'm sure.
It's that easy.
Huge thanks to Dave for coming in as ever. Dave, anything you want to plug? Anything you want to bring anyone's attention to?
Yeah, so relaunch of my InfoRed channel this week. So we've got exclusive interview coming up with Kate Pratt, hopefully. So
the Liverpool Football Club commercial team.
That's the very same. That is in the pipeline, and yeah, more of what's going on off the pitch to kind of instruct our thinking about what goes on onto it. So that's it. So it's info.redlfc.substack.com. So there we are.
There we are.
So be in the show notes, I'm sure.
Thanks a lot to David coming in. Huge thanks to Saley. That is the fantastic eSIM service. Do check them out if you are travelling outside of the UK and you want to avoid those nasty bills and keep your internet connection tip top. Thanks a lot to Saley, and thanks a lot to Paddy for making all this happen. Up to it.